So the best advice I've ever gotten for when starting with AI use is that you want to start with the three categories of reading, writing, and chatting. If you're really trying to dive deeply into how to use AI productively at work, reading, writing, and chatting are the way to go. And so I'm going to show three brief examples of each. So here's an example of what I would call reading. It's a slightly different version of reading. There was a 90-minute video of a panel discussion about people talking about children and technology. It so happened that my cousin, who used to work at Sesame Street and now works at Google, was on the panel. So I was really interested in how she did. I wanted to know what she was talking about. I didn't want to watch a 90-minute YouTube video to find out how that went. So I went to ChatGPT, and the examples I'm showing you today are from ChatGPT. Everything in a gray bubble is me, is what I've typed in, and everything in white is what the computer had to say. I typed in the link to a YouTube video, and I said, what is this? And then I said, what does my cousin, what does Jen Kotler have to say? And it gives me a one-paragraph summary. But, asking a tool that is an artificial intelligence for help never has to be the end of the conversation. You can always go back and forth. So this was fine, but I wanted more. So I said, okay, fine, but write a detailed outline of all her comments. And now it watches a 90-minute video in about 20 seconds and gives me a well-structured summary of points with sub-bullets of everything she had to say. So that's an example of reading. If I was more mistrustful of whether this was correct or not, whether it might be giving me false answers, I could have said, give me the date and time stamp within the video of everything that you're telling me here. And I can go double check and look in YouTube and say, oh, when it says she said this, did she actually say it? In this case, it was accurate. Here's an example of writing. I uploaded my resume to ChatGPT. Pretty standard resume, lists where I've worked, where I went to school, has my address, based solely on the attached. So again, I'm telling it explicitly, don't go online, don't believe what you've read about this guy, just write a bio based on this resume. Write something that's somber, formal, and 250 words or less, because that's what I need. It starts, Rich Leimsider is a seasoned leader, blah, blah, blah. Again, one prompt never has to be the ending. Now I want a more playful and jaunty version. Oh, suddenly, I'm not a seasoned leader, I'm a dynamo. Exciting. 42% more jaunty. I don't even know what that means, but you can always have this conversation. Now I'm a swashbuckler in the social sector, right? This is a colleague that never gets frustrated when you ask it to do the same project over and over again. It never gets annoyed that you ask it to redo its work. And now I finally went back and I said, do it like as if I'm a Silicon Valley crypto tech bro. And it says, Rich Leimsider is the ultimate disruptor, crushing it at the intersection of social impact. So, there's often criticism that we hear that AI writes in a really boring, plain vanilla tone. Well, AI learned by reading the whole internet. So if you ask a general question, hey, write this, hey, write a bio, of course it's going to give you an answer at the dead center of its knowledge, the plain vanilla version of the internet that it's read. But there's no reason that you can't aim it in one direction or another and get lots of different perspectives on tone, on language, on length. If you need a 500-word bio versus a 100-word bio, you can go back and forth. And I got 4 versions of my bio in about 3.5 minutes here. That's reading and writing. And then here's an example, a little bit more sophisticated, of chatting. So an artificial intelligence can pretend to have a conversation with you in lots of different ways, and some that I think can be pretty useful in our organizations. So in this case, I actually said to the computer, I said to ChatGPT, let's create a training role play. Let's pretend that I'm a 25-year-old with a high school education. I do a really great job working with kids, but I've just been promoted for the first time at our organization, and I'm now running an after-school program. I've never been a manager before. I told ChatGPT, you pretend to be the mom of a kid who's struggling in the after-school program, and I'm actually going to do role-playing with you. I'm going to practice with you for how I might engage with a parent who's frustrated about what's going on. Now, one of the tricks you can do is just like you would do with a real colleague is, in the same way we would never have a colleague come into our office and tell that colleague, okay, be completely silent. I'm going to give you an assignment, and then you must leave my office without asking any questions or giving any feedback. Go. No, of course not. We would say, here's what I want from you, but ask me any questions. How could I clarify the assignment I'm giving you? You can actually do the same with any of these AI tools, whether it's this one or Gemini or Claude. So in this case, I said, before we start the role play, ask me questions that help you improve the process. Great. It actually asked very reasonable questions. Are there specific skills you want me to focus on during the role play? Do you want me to incorporate any challenges? How do you like to get feedback? I gave it some brief answers. We began and we did a role play. It pretended to be a parent. I gave it a pretty generic background, so this was a pretty generic role play. In your organization, you know what you do, right? Your program managers know what you do. You might even have written manuals or guides for how you want staff to engage with clients, patients, others. You could drive a role play based on all of those things. So we went back and forth. We did a role play. The computer actually gives feedback. Okay, here's what you did that was good. Pretend employee. You showed empathy, you were proactive, you had engagement, but there were some areas for improvement. Again, the conversation is never over. So I said, can you be more detailed in your feedback? Of course, why not? Here's more detailed feedback. Then I said, can you actually list specific social work or human development frameworks that address these issues? I want to learn more. Great. Have you heard of a strengths-based approach? Here's a good book. Have you heard of solution-focused brief therapy? What about ecological systems theory? You should read this article. These are all real books. These are all real articles that are suggested based on its experience role-playing with me. Now, do I think this role play is better than what your senior staff or your HR department could develop for your junior managers? I do not. I think this is probably average or slightly above average at best. But this is available any minute of the day to every single one of your staff. And so one of the questions to ask is not whether AI provides right now the best possible example of what it can do, but is it better than the currently best available human? And if it's 11 o'clock at night, the night before a really challenging conversation, or if you've got 50 new managers and only 2 people working in HR doing professional development, then being able to offer a role-playing experience like this could be pretty powerful. Reading, writing, and chatting.